Selena DeVries is a registered dietitian living with celiac disease who specializes in the dietary management of celiac through her virtual private practice, Health Bean Nutrition. She offers online group education programs, individual dietary counseling, and every summer she runs a celiac kids camp in Kelowna, British Columbia. Selena sits on the board of directors for the Canadian Celiac Association and serves as the board liaison to the CCA's Professional Advisory Council, and she's a well-respected dietitian in the gluten-free community. Megan Donnelly is a registered dietitian nutritionist who joined the Dr. Schar USA team in September of 2018. Megan has previous experience in both clinical dietetics and the food industry. Prior to this role, she completed her dietetic internship at the James J. Peters Veterans Affairs Medical Center in the Bronx, New York. She also worked in quality assurance at Pepperidge Farm. Megan received her BA in biology from the College of the Holy Cross and her Master of Science in Nutrition and Dietetics from New York University. Her specialties include chronic kidney disease, celiac disease, and gluten-related disorders, and irritable bowel syndrome. Megan will be presenting to us. The question and answer period will be handled by both Megan and Selena, as Selena will jump in to help with questions that are Canada specific. Megan, please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mark, for that introduction. I'm going to try to make sure my camera is right. Okay.
It's okay.
Great. Okay, is my screen available?
Yep, you just start running your slideshow. There you go.
All right, perfect. All right, well, hi everyone. I'm really excited to be here with you today. As Mark mentioned, I'm a registered dietitian for Dr. Schar USA, and actually Canada as well, so we call it Dr. Schar North America. I'm here to present to you today what I hope will be some helpful tips on maintaining your gluten-free diet during the COVID-19 pandemic. I've been seeing a lot of questions in our social media channels and our customer service network, so I'm really hoping that I can answer some of your questions, and feel free to ask as many as you'd like. So let's get started. So this is probably I just wanted to kind of cover COVID-19 specifically, really because we've been seeing so many questions about whether or not people with celiac disease are at higher risk for contracting the virus. And I just want to reiterate that people with celiac disease, it's not thought that people with celiac disease are at higher risk for contracting the virus. As a reminder, those who are at increased risk for serious illness with the virus is if they're 65 years of age or older, living in a nursing home or long-term care facility, or are immunocompromised. I want to reiterate here that most people with celiac disease are not considered immunocompromised. A lot of times there's confusion because, we know it's an autoimmune disorder, and that's not necessarily the same thing as immunocompromised. Immunocompromised individuals are those who are on immunosuppressant medications like steroids. It's people who have an underlying medical condition like kidney disease or diabetes. So again, people with celiac disease are not typically considered immunocompromised. As we know, this virus is very contagious. It can be spread from person to person by respiratory droplets through coughing, sneezing, or sharing personal items like beverages, utensils, toothbrushes, and things like that. I imagine most people with celiac disease are not really sharing personal items anyways because of the cross-contamination issues that we see, but I just wanted to put this up as a reminder, and hopefully I can get into a little bit more celiac disease specific things. So I did want to mention this because there is some gastrointestinal manifestation of the virus that I learned about recently when I was on a call with the CDC and the American Autoimmune and Related Diseases Organization. So they were seeing in the hospital that about 50% of hospitalized patients with COVID-19 were reporting gastrointestinal symptoms, 18% of which were reporting diarrhea. So they think that this may have been an early warning sign of the virus that maybe wasn't being talked about as much. And I do want to point out the second point, which is about half of patients who tested positive for the disease in the hospital, about 50% of them tested positive in their stool 5 weeks after cessation of their respiratory symptoms, and up to 11 days after their respiratory tests were clear. And I think that's significant because it just reiterates the point that hand washing is so important no matter what. And if you're experiencing any unusual GI symptoms, it might not necessarily be related to gluten. So just to be in touch with your body. This is not to scare people, but just to be in touch with your body and recognize when something else may be going on. So again, what this means for people with celiac disease, you want to follow your local health department guidelines on social distancing and hygiene. Hand washing is always the most important thing you can do for yourself. So wash your hands before and after eating and after using the restroom. Maintain a strict gluten-free diet to prevent GI issues. I think this is really important. It seems like it should be understood, but you want to make sure that you're not confusing symptoms and confusing your stomach issues aren't something that could be related to gluten, or maybe it's another health issue. So it's really important to stick to your gluten-free diet always, but especially during this time, because you want to make sure that any unusual changes are something that you're able to recognize. And then, of course, if you're experiencing any unusual GI symptoms or you develop a fever or cough, you want to contact your medical provider immediately. All right, and I also want to reiterate, sticking to the gluten-free diet is, we know it's so critical for the health of people with celiac disease, but it's also, critical for fighting infections. When you have a gastrointestinal issue, where you're having diarrhea or vomiting, you're more likely to catch something else. So you want to make sure that you're avoiding the GI issues associated with gluten intake. And then you also want to ensure adequate nutrient absorption. I know you're probably all very familiar with this image of the normal healthy villi and the villi of someone with celiac disease who has not been following a gluten-free diet. And it's this flattened villi. And when your villi are flattened, you're not able to absorb nutrients. And so just, a reminder, you need all your nutrients in order to, keep your immune system up, maintain your optimal immune health, and stay healthy in general. So you want to make sure you're absorbing all your nutrients by sticking to your gluten-free diet and making sure you keep those villi healthy. All right, and I really liked what Justine was saying in her presentation about consuming balanced meals and snacks. I think it's really easy when you're cooped up in your house to just grab all the delicious, sometimes, not so good for you snacks, and, those have a place too, but you want to make sure that you're consuming a lot of fruits and vegetables, eating your proteins, and choosing whole grains. This is a great image of the plate. I found this on a website, the Canadian Food Guide website. Really liked it. It's much more beautiful looking than the American one. But yeah, I love this. Half your plate filled with fruits and vegetables. A quarter of it is a protein food. Doesn't have to be animal-based. It can be a plant-based protein. And then whole grains. All right, so this image, I think, has become, at least around me, I'm from New York City, so this has become very normal image of what a grocery store shelf looks like. And it can be really scary when you have a dietary restriction and you can't find the food that you need. So I'm hoping to give you some tools to get you through this pandemic, and hopefully in a healthy way. So we're going to talk about sticking to your gluten-free diet, avoiding cross-contact in shared environments, because I know that a lot of people are maybe at home and, maybe not everyone in the house is following a gluten-free diet, although I know that can be safer for some people. Maybe it's a little more challenging for others. We're going to talk about keeping your pantry stocked with all the good, healthy foods that you need, consuming foods that support immune health, creating healthy meals with what you have, and I'm going to give you some resources and some tools and some recipes at the end. All right, so foods that support immune health. I think this is something that, you see a lot in the news. You don't really know what's real and what's not. And I think before we get into specific nutrients, the overall theme is that if you're consuming a lot of fruits and vegetables and whole grains, you're really getting most of what you need. So I'm focusing on nutrients here just to educate you a little bit about how to balance your diet and thinking about these nutrients. But really, if you're eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, you're going to get mostly what you need. So don't worry too much about any numbers or how much vitamin C do I need. That's not the point. The point is to consume a lot of whole foods. So probiotics and prebiotics, I don't know how familiar you guys are with these things, but probiotics are basically live organisms. They're bacteria, and they're really, really good for your gut and supporting your immune health. So things like fermented vegetables, sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, yogurt is a good source of probiotics. These things are going to be good for your gut and good for your overall health. A healthy gut, we know, is kind of a healthy life. So keeping your gut healthy. And then prebiotics, these are types of fibers that feed the healthy gut bacteria. You're going to find them in things like beans, asparagus, garlic, onions, bananas, oats, apples, and flax. So there's a lot of sources of prebiotics and probiotics. These are just a few. They are naturally occurring in foods. I think a lot of people like to take a probiotic supplement. That's fine, but you can get a decent amount of probiotics from food. Moving on to vitamin C, I think everyone probably, this is the first nutrient they think of when they think of immune health, and vitamin C is always something I always see people drinking Emergen-C when they feel a cold coming on, and I don't really know how much that helps, but you do need to consume vitamin C all the time. The good news is it's in a lot of foods. So citrus is always on everyone's first thought. Oranges, that's definitely true. Squirting a little lemon or lime juice on your food, consuming oranges and grapefruit as part of your meals, snacks, that's a great thing to do. There are other sources besides these. I think sometimes we forget, the tropical fruits are great sources of vitamin C. Berries are a great source of vitamin C. They're also very high in fiber, so that's really great. And then for vegetables, a lot of people don't realize that bell peppers have more vitamin C than oranges. So there's lots of sources. Basically, if you're consuming a lot of fruits and vegetables, you're going to get your vitamin C, but good to think about. And then moving on to zinc. Zinc is a mineral that is good for supporting your immune health. You can find this in a lot of your protein-based foods. So beans and legumes, seeds, shellfish, and nuts, you'll get zinc from. So again, it's important to think about these nutrients in the picture of your overall diet. Make sure you're getting enough and make sure you're not deficient. But in general, if you're consuming a lot of fruits and vegetables and whole foods, you're going to be getting the amounts that you need. All right, so this is something that, it's gluten-free pantry essentials is what I called it, but I think it would be a little bit crazy to think that someone might have every single thing on this list in your pantry. Maybe you do, but I certainly do not. But I tried to make it a list that you could refer back to in case you're feeling like, you're cooking at home more, you're running out of ideas, maybe something on this list can inspire you. It's certainly not all-encompassing. I'm sure there are things that I forgot, but I did try to cover stuff in every food group. So I'm starting with beans and legumes. You can purchase dried or canned beans and legumes. Obviously, the canned version is easier when you're just trying to throw them in a salad or something. But I will say, my grocery stores have not had any canned goods. So I had to buy a bag of dried beans the other day. And, I never made them before that way, but it was actually really easy. I just cooked them in some water and I added some seasonings, and they tasted better. And I was like, I should be doing this all the time. You can make them in bulk. You can make smaller amounts. So if your store is running low on canned goods right now, the dried version, they last forever, and they can be tasting just as good. And lentils are great. Lentils are they're so easy to cook. They're much faster than beans. So if you don't want to do the effort of cooking beans, lentils are great too. And grains. So even though I work for Schar, I think it's so important that we are consuming whole grains as much as possible. This goes for everyone, especially when you have celiac disease. A lot of times, people avoid grains, and that shouldn't be the case. We should really be consuming some of these gluten-free ones. So rice, quinoa, those are probably the most well known, but there are others. So I think it's a really good idea to use this time to, diversify your grains. I was in the store the other day and I could not find a bag of rice anywhere. And I ended up having to buy a bag of millet. And, it works great. So most of the grain-based dishes, you can kind of swap them in depending on what's available. So that's always something to consider. Fish and meat. I've been consuming, I think a lot of people are stocking up on canned tuna right now, but canned salmon, canned chicken, sardines, these are also good sources of a lot of the minerals, including iron, which is something that, sometimes a lot of people in general are deficient in, especially women. So canned fish and meat can be great. And then different flours. Now, I've been seeing everywhere that there's a bread making trend I've been seeing it on Instagram and Facebook all over the place. I think that's great. I think this is a great time to experiment with different flours. So definitely a good idea to, maybe try something you haven't tried before, maybe making some almond flour cookies or something. Like I said, canned goods, they're in high demand right now. But I do want to point out that when you're buying a canned vegetable, it's always good to look for low sodium options. And if there isn't a low sodium option, or even if there is, it's a good idea to just put them in a strainer and rinse them off under cold water for like 30 seconds. That removes a lot of the extra sodium that you can be consuming accidentally when you are buying a canned vegetable. So I'm a big fan of canned vegetables, but I do think a lot of times they'll require rinsing, and that goes for beans as well. Canned fruits, I think canned fruits can be great. The only thing is that you want to choose the ones that are packed in 100% juice. I would avoid ones that are packed in syrup because they tend to be very, very high in sugar. And again, with the fruits, I recommend rinsing them a little, maybe not for the full 30 seconds, but getting some of that juice off. I think you can still maintain the flavor that way. So, and removing some of the sugar. Condiments, I'm going to talk about condiments, oils, and herbs and spices kind of together. I think this is a great time to really get into your spice cabinet and your condiments that you're keeping in your fridge that you haven't maybe touched in a while, and try different things. Adding sesame oil to food can give it a very different flavor than just regular olive oil does. So trying different things, different combinations, and these are all shelf stable, which is really great. And that same thing with vinegars. And then nuts and seeds. I really love the use of nuts and seeds in just about everything, especially things like chia, hemp, and flax. These are great, nutritious additions to just about anything. So I add chia seeds to truthfully anything. I just made a homemade granola today with oats, and it was really delicious, and I'm probably going to have it tomorrow with chia seeds and some almond milk, and it'll be a really delicious, hearty cereal that I made. So I recommend adding these things to all your meals if you can. I mean, flax goes great on salads. You could just sprinkle it on. Same with hemp. So any chance, if you haven't tried chia or hemp or flax seeds yet, I recommend that you give it a try. They're really nutritious, really high in fiber, and really high in omega-3 fatty acids, all of which we want to consume a lot of. All right, and so there's some other things too. The produce kind of seemed like I had all shelf-stable items in there, but not to forget about the fresh produce and the refrigerated items. So I've been kind of thinking about the most nutritious things I've been seeing in the store. A lot of times the cheese, eggs, milk, yogurt, the meat, poultry, and fish have been a little hard to come by. So always check the freezer section, because if something's not available in the fresh section or in the deli, or there's no eggs in the store, go in the freezer. Sometimes you can find some hard-boiled eggs. It's not quite the same, but definitely still an option. frozen foods. There are some good gluten-free burger, beef and turkey and veggie burgers out there, so definitely something to consider. The cauliflower pizza crusts, I think these are actually really delicious. I don't know if anyone has tried a cauliflower crust. The most common one that I'm familiar with here in the States is cauliflower. It's actually really good. And then I'm a huge fan of frozen fruits and vegetables. They are typically picked at their peak ripeness and then flash frozen. So they really, really are nutrient dense. If you don't like a certain frozen fruit or vegetable, the texture of it, try adding it to yogurt or something, or use your frozen vegetables to make a really nice soup. You don't have to just consume it in its typical form. Try different things. A lot of frozen vegetables specifically, they puree really well to make delicious soups, or adding them to like an egg casserole type of thing. You use your vegetables in different ways when they're frozen, certainly, but still really delicious and nutritious. Of course, eat all the fruits and vegetables. I think that's kind of my general theme, is eat all the fruits and vegetables you have. And then, there is a place for some gluten-free bread and gluten-free pasta to just keep in your pantry. I think, it's if you're not interested in making your own bread, that's totally reasonable. There's a lot of great shelf-stable gluten-free breads out there, and a lot of them freeze as well. All right, so I just wanted to, throw some recommendations out there. So if there's no gluten-free pasta in the store, try some spiralized veggies. You're going to need to eat a lot of vegetables to kind of get the bulk that you want, but spiralized veggies are full of fiber, so they're very filling. So having something like spiralized zucchini with maybe some mashed white beans and some tomato sauce and some meat is a great meal, and it's going to be really filling because of the fiber keeps you full. Of course, if you have some gluten-free pasta available, you can definitely mix it with the veggies. I love to do that. I love a veggie pasta balance, so that's always something you can try. There's no bread in the store. I've been seeing so many sad bread shelves, but there are other options. You can make your own, and there's a lot of great recipes out there. But then you can also, try a different base. I love using lettuce cups with tacos. This sandwich in the middle is on a cauliflower and I think cassava flour homemade patty, which the recipe looked really good, so that's an option. You can always stick your sandwiches in a little cucumber. Of course, if there's no bread, you can always try using some crackers instead. So there's a lot of options. I would say, if you can't have a regular sandwich, maybe try having it with a salad base or something else. All right, so I would say, during these times where going to the grocery store can be really scary. It can be overwhelming. You may not feel safe going. That's totally fine. So I wanted to kind of speak to that a little bit and address it, because I know that the grocery store may not be someplace that you want to head right now. So shopping online for shelf-stable products, there are a lot of options when you go on, Amazon Marketplace and some other online grocery options. You won't have as much success with produce, but certainly good for things like, rice and beans when you shop online. This is something that I think the next one here, checking out smaller retailers, there's a lot of small businesses that really need support right now. And I think this is a really great time to, try that little grocery store on the corner, that little convenience store. I live in New York City, and we call them bodegas, but they're these little markets like all around, and they have a lot of good, healthy options that I just, never really checked out before, because I would always just go to the main grocery store. So checking out smaller retailers, they'll probably be less crowded. There's a better chance that they'll have what you need because they're not shopped as much. You can, when you're preparing meals for a family, I know it can be a challenge, especially when you're shopping on a budget. And I know gluten-free food, if it can be a little bit more expensive. So in this environment, maybe you just prioritize the gluten-free needs of the people in your family who need it. This may not be an option for everyone, and I can certainly understand that. A lot of people have totally gluten-free homes, and I think that's great. But if you're having trouble finding enough gluten-free food to feed your family, it can be a challenge. And I think considering the needs of the people who need it the most first, but obviously I don't need to say that to this group, but sometimes it can be hard when there's only a few people in the family who need to follow a special diet. Changing things up with spices and sauces, love that. I think anytime you can really change the whole vibe of a meal with just a different spice. Try pickling. I have never done pickling before, but I just purchased some mason jars the other day, and I'm going to try pickling cucumbers for the first time. And what better way to enjoy a vegetable? It prevents it from going bad. You get some probiotics in there. So making big batches and freezing leftovers, I think that this is a great way to minimize waste and saves you delicious meals for later. If if you're gonna, it doesn't take any extra time to roast 2 whole chickens instead of roasting 1. So, save all the parts, put some in the freezer, gives you meals for later dates. All right, and avoiding cross-contact. So again, cross-contact is when gluten-free foods or ingredients come into contact with gluten, which then becomes unsafe for people with celiac disease to consume. So again, I'm sure I don't need to give everyone these reminders, but if your living situation has changed, maybe the people that you're living with right now aren't so aware. So it's a good idea to have a separate toaster, have separate condiments for your people with celiac disease in your family. Make sure you're washing your hands thoroughly in between food handling. I mean, right now that should be going on anyways, but you want to make sure if you're preparing gluten-containing and gluten-free food, you're definitely washing your hands. Washing your utensils, so important. Gluten, a lot of people ask me, do I need my own kitchen utensils for my child with celiac disease? And I would say, no, if you're being very careful about making sure your things are thoroughly washed in between each use with soap and water. If there's any risk that, that knife is going to be touching bread and then touching your child with celiac disease sandwich, then, you might want to have separate ones, whatever works for you, but washing does work when it comes to utensils and pots and pans and kitchen tools like that. You definitely don't want to use the same cooking water or fryer to prepare gluten-free and gluten-containing foods. This also applies to air fryers. It's really interesting. Air fryers, I think, have gotten really popular. So I don't know if anyone has any experience with that, but you need to have you shouldn't be frying gluten-containing foods and gluten-free ones in the same air fryer. And then avoid purchasing from bulk bins at the grocery store. So this can be a tough one, but in these times, even still, I think it's extra important that you're not doing that. I think people sticking their hands, I'm not even sure grocery stores are still allowing the bulk bins, but at this time, for people with celiac disease, I would avoid it. And in general, during this time, I think it's a good idea to avoid the bulk bins. All right, and just some other reminders when you're cooking meals in a shared kitchen. Always prepare the gluten-free food first. That way you're not risking contaminating the food. Always cut gluten-free foods first. And if you're using the same knife, you want to wash the knife with soap and water before cutting the gluten-free food. And do not use a knife with any visible residue. Caveat there, just because you don't see any residue doesn't mean it's not there. You need to make sure it's thoroughly washed and dried separately from the gluten-containing source. Always use fresh, clean water to cook gluten-free pasta. You can use the same pots and pans for gluten-free and gluten-containing food only if you have washed them thoroughly in between uses. So I'm not saying that you can just go for it and cook using the same pan right after each other. It's really important that you wash them thoroughly in between uses. All right, and I just wanted to throw some healthy meals and snacks out there, give you some ideas if you're getting in a little bit of a rut with your cooking. So think about balance all the time. You want to include protein, fiber, fruits, and veggies. So fiber comes from fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. So, thinking about including some of these in all of your meals. I really love cut up fruits and veggies. I like to call these kid-friendly snack ideas, but they're certainly fine for adults too. So cut up fruits and veggies with some hummus, low salt popcorn trail mix. I love popcorn trail mix because, it's a little less calorie dense than a regular trail mix. So I throw some homemade popcorn in there, some nuts, and some dried fruit. Really delicious snack. And then yogurt and fruit is always a good one too. I love rice cakes with nut butter. Um, and putting some fruit on it makes it even better for me. One thing I've been doing recently is I've been making a homemade raspberry chia jam. So I'll cook like frozen raspberries with some chia seeds and I'll put it on top of my rice cakes with peanut butter. It's one of my favorite things. Hard-boiled eggs. And then some recipes. So I hope that these slides can be mailed out to you because I am not going to go through every step of the recipes on these slides, but some really good stuff on here. I got these from our company's website. So these honey mint ricotta toasts, I think are delicious. If you haven't had ricotta with honey, it is like a golden combination. So definitely recommend this recipe. It's my family's favorite. And you don't need to worry too much about if you don't have mint, that's fine. You can substitute with something else. If you don't only have apples, no pears, fine. This recipe allows for you to play with it a little bit, but really delicious. This is a gluten-free pasta with red pepper pesto. So the pesto, this was actually created by one of my dietitian friends, Brittany. And this pesto is, I'm telling you, this is delicious. And it is such a healthy, nutrient dense meal. You've got your healthy fats with the oil, you've got your lemon juice with so you get some vitamin C in there. The roasted red peppers give you a good vegetable, and then you're adding even more vegetables with your broccoli and your onion. So it's really, really delicious one. I really recommend this. The instructions are here. I won't go through them, but really good. This is one of my favorites. And then everyone's got to have a little something for dessert, and it's all about balance. And I think there's definitely a place for some indulgence and some good desserts in there. So if you want to have some of our glazed donut holes, this recipe is awesome. And you can find this on our website, but I've also included it for you here. So this is one of my favorites. Really good. All right, and with that, I'm just gonna give you a quick company snapshot so you can understand what Schar is doing in this pandemic. We are a dedicated gluten-free company that we've been doing gluten-free in Europe for over 35 years, and we came over to North America about 10 years ago. So our company, we are truly experts in the gluten-free, and our whole company's mission is to improve the lives of people with special nutritional needs. And with that, taste, quality, and safety are our biggest concerns. So definitely, if you haven't tried Schar, of course I recommend it. But we've been really doing this for a long time, so our food is definitely safe. These are all the attributes of what our commitment to quality means. I will say we have an international team of dietitians that works to make sure that we provide the most nutritious options possible. So we grow a lot of our own grains. Everything is non-GMO. We don't add preservatives. We don't add artificial colors or flavors. We test every batch and every raw material to make sure that it is below 5 parts per million of gluten using the ELISA method. So the ELISA method is, if for those of you who don't know, it's the gold standard testing method at this time. We test every ingredient and every batch once it's complete in our dedicated gluten-free facilities. So safety, hugely important for us. That's part of the reason we grow our own grains. We use a modified atmosphere packaging to improve the freshness of our bread so that we don't have to add preservatives. And we have new nutrition goals aimed at reducing sugar, salt, and fat across all categories, and adding some good fiber into our staple items like our breads. And I really like this image. This was taken at our facility in Swedesboro, New Jersey. We are still producing, and we feel very lucky to be able to continue to produce. But in this pandemic, we want to make sure that our celiac disease community is well fed and that you have access to safe food. So we have been producing nonstop. And these are some of our plant workers who are there working for you, and they're very passionate about what they're doing, and they're making sure they're safe. They're getting, they have strict rules about sanitation, they're getting temperature checked, but they are working hard for you to make sure that you have safe food. And with that, I think I'm done. So I guess I'll stop the screen share.
Thanks, Megan. You mentioned about sharing your slide presentation with attendees. We're happy to do that.
Okay,
We'll
great.
that for sure. Before we move to questions, let's give away some more prizes. Anita's Organic Mill offers a wide range of gluten-free products, including pancake and waffle mixes, dried fruit, all-purpose flour, oats, and more. They are part of the gluten-free certification program. You'll get a nice variety of products in your prize pack, which is a $50 value. The winner is Josiane Haslett from Toronto, Ontario. Knick is a family-owned company located in Edmonton, and they've been creating delicious products for the gluten-free community since 1991. Their scrumptious baked goodies are free from gluten, dairy, nuts, peanuts, and now soy. They have donuts, pizza crusts, muffins, bagels, and much more. Knick offers 44 products for shipping and free shipping for orders over $50. Their products are certified with the gluten-free certification program. Your prize pack contains cookies, cake mixes, pancake mix, and all-purpose flour, a $40 value. And the winner is Anita Sahota from Surrey, British Columbia. Free Yum's goal is to make wholesome, allergen-free treats that taste absolutely delicious. They use healthy ingredients, including natural sweeteners and whole grains, and they offer organic and non-GMO whenever possible. They offer baked bars, cookies, and chocolate bites. Your prize pack is a $50 value. The winner is Allison Meek from Ottawa, Ontario. All right, now we'll move into questions. Congratulations to our winners. So I'll start with a question actually about Dr. Schar products. I had a couple questions about if this and that product is available in Europe. When's it going to come over here? And also like croissants, puff pastry sheets was mentioned. I know there's the lady fingers are sometimes hard to find here. And is Dr. Schar planning any products that are corn-free for people that are sensitive to corn?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so as in terms of the products coming from Europe, I know the frozen items are like always a big want, and we're hoping that they can be in Canada soon. There's a lot of logistics, but we're always open to the suggestions. If you want something, follow us on social media and send in your comments to customer service, because that's the best way we can find out what people want. Lady fingers, I know those can be hard. We just redid the recipe, so I believe the distribution is growing in Canada. If you want that item, I recommend reaching out to your store, because we can bring it to most stores. It's just that sometimes the store chooses not to carry it because they don't know there's a need for it. And then you had one more question, but I can't remember right now.
There was the puff pastry was mentioned. Various people mentioned various products that they saw in Europe or wherever, and we're hoping they'll come here. So
yeah,
post it on your page. Ask the store manager if it's something that's available somewhere else in Canada, just not at your store. That kind of thing.
Yeah. That's
right. A number of people asked. This is a more general. Probably would need Selena to jump in on this for the angle too. Tough to find beans and lentils that don't have a may contain statement. Should we avoid these? Any recommended brands that are gluten-free, and how best to cook beans? You talked about that. They can be tough to get them not crunchy depending on the beans. For dry beans, can dry.
So I'll pop in here, talk about Canada. So we recently had a label reading guideline. So that document actually can be downloaded on the CCA website. But for beans and legumes in general, we don't actually recommend that they have to have a gluten-free claim on them. So you can read the label in general for gluten in Canada by identifying for brow on the label. So there's a lot of canned beans that don't have a may contain statement. So a couple of brands would be Unico and Primo, which is widely available across Canada for their canned beans and legumes. The one that you do need to be a little bit more mindful of is lentils. Lentils can be contaminated, and there actually is a small percentage of foreign grain allowed in lentils. Regardless if you find dry lentils or canned lentils, you do want to pick through them, rinse them, and do that a couple of times to make sure you're picking out the foreign grain, dusting off or rinsing off any dust on those lentils. Lentils do commonly have a may contain wheat, so it is a bit tricky to find. I know in Canada, Western Family, which can be found at Save On Foods, does not have a may contain statement, so those are a good variety. Also, True Roots in Canada does have a gluten-free claim on there. Again, regardless with lentils, if it has a gluten-free claim or not, you want to pick through for foreign grains and rinse them. And then for dried beans, so anything other than lentils, you can, again, read the label like you would for brow, make sure there's no may contain statement on there, and then just pick through for foreign grains and rinse them. And then you can cook them like Megan mentioned. But don't add salt at the beginning, because if you do that, they're going to stay crunchy.
Yes, definitely. That's a good tip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. There's a lot of mixed information online about celiacs and the ability to tolerate oats. I know it's been said, like this is online, that 96% of celiacs can digest oats, provided you ease it back into your diet. But I've also read that the avenin in oats causes reactions in around 20% of celiacs. So there's a lot of information flying around out there. Can you clarify?
I always recommend certified gluten-free oats because there is that risk of contamination. For in the US at least, we don't recommend oats unless you have about 6 to 8 months of fully healed intestines. So they tend to, in the US, redo a biopsy and make sure you're healed before reintroducing in small amounts. That's in the US, and I don't know if it's the same in Canada. I probably.
So in Canada, there's different celiac centers do different things. So most of the time, what GIs and RDs will recommend is that you avoid oats for a certain time period, maybe 6 months or a year, until your TTG antibodies come into normal range. And at that point, then we'll start to reintroduce oats. Because if somebody does have a reaction to oats and they have it and they introduce it at the very beginning of the diet, it could be due to contamination, or it might be due to the irritating fibers in the oats. So typically we say to hold off on oats. Sometimes in pediatric kids we'll say to introduce those safe gluten-free oats at the beginning because they are a great source of fiber, but sometimes that fiber can be irritating to somebody, and it might cause some GI distress, which may make people think that they're not safe, but in reality it might just be the fiber that's causing the GI issues.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, actually. You can't just all of a sudden introduce a ton of fiber into your diet all at once, or it will cause some irritation. So, but move up to it slowly. A lot of times, people with celiac disease have been avoiding foods for so long that have caused stomach distress that they're really low in fiber. So you might have to start off smaller, and definitely drink a lot of water when you're doing that.
Yes, that's very important.
I want to be regular.
Yeah.
It's with the COVID-19 pandemic, it's difficult to get fresh foods in many areas. I know you showed those pictures of store shelves, Megan, especially in rural areas like low bread supplies, low fresh meat supplies. So people are having to eat more processed foods. For meal planning, what would you think is an acceptable amount of your diet being processed foods for you and your family?
Well, I think it's a little hard to say what percent would be okay. And it also kind of depends on what the level of processing is. There are certain foods that are healthier choices than others. I think, a potato chip and I don't even know, like candy diet is not going to be as healthy as, a cracker that has some good fiber, good seeds in it that you have with a topping on it. So I think it's hard to put a percentage on it, but I will say that you can always look for a better option by looking at the ingredient statement and looking for something that has ingredients with names that you recognize. That's, I don't know if that's helpful, but
Yeah, that's a great point. I like the point looking at the ingredient list and looking for foods and ingredients that you recognize. And in Canada, you can also use that rule on the nutrition facts table, that 15% rule. I don't know if you guys have seen that on the back of a nutrition label before, but there's a percent DB on the far right-hand side, and anything that's going to be 15% or above on a specific nutrient is going to be a lot of a nutrient. And anything that is below 15% is going to be a little of a nutrient. So when you look at that, you'll see there's a saturated fat, there's sodium, and then there's fiber. Saturated fat and salt we want a little of in our diet, and fiber we want a lot of. So for fiber, aim for 15% or higher, and for sodium and salt, look at products that have 15% or lower, and that can help you to compare those convenient items and make a healthier choice.
Yeah.
Another thing that is annoying for may contain statements are nuts and seeds. Are they high risk items, or is it more like ones that are roasted, seasoned, etc., that are higher?
I think it kind of depends again. Definitely when they're roasted and seasoned, that just introduces another step of processing. So I would say those are higher risk. But in the US, they do actually certify most nuts and seeds as gluten-free. I don't know if that's the same in Canada, but I would encourage people to look for that label if it's available.
Yeah. In Canada, again, in that label reading guideline we have on the CCA, there's a document there. We have the nuts and seeds. All nuts we don't identify as high risk, but the seeds specifically, we have two that we identify as high risk, and that's flax and hemp, because they are grown typically in fields by wheat or rye or barley, and it can become commonly contaminated. So we do recommend looking for hemp and flax with a gluten-free claim or a certification logo. And nuts, basically, of course, if you introduce a seasoning like Megan mentioned, that's another level of potential gluten being in there in the seasoning mix. But we don't need to have a gluten-free claim or certification logo on, say, like a raw nut, like raw almonds, for example. If the ingredient label just says almonds, there's no may contain, there's no other precautionary statement, those would be safe to consume even without a gluten-free claim. Where you want that claim, though, is with flax or hemp.
Yeah, I know Manitoba Harvest, I mentioned earlier, does they sell gluten-free hemp hearts in Canada?
They do, yeah.
And a lot of people more and more seem to be sensitive to soy. Like, I always felt that soy was a very healthy alternative. Soy milk has lots of enriched, like a lot of vitamins and minerals in there too, but a lot of people cannot tolerate soy. What is the deal with this being more sensitive, being more of an issue now? And someone also asked, is there any other suggested replacements for soy sauce apart from coconut aminos? Because they found that was like $10 a bottle.
So, a lot of people are soy sensitive, and I don't know that there's a direct correlation with celiac disease, but I think soy sensitivity is growing in general. For soy sauce, I'm not actually sure I have to think about it a little bit, what a good alternative besides coconut aminos. But if you are soy sensitive, I think there are a lot of good options. I know our company's trying to eliminate soy from our products because we know that there's a big need there. And just Mark, actually, you asked me before about, are we going to consider changing the use of corn in our products? And that was the one I forgot. The answer is hopefully we're going to be including more whole grains instead of exclusively corn-based.
Thank you. I had forgotten that too. So around the home, do you need to use a different sponge and dishcloth for washing gluten-free and non-gluten-free dishes? And what about like cutting boards or dishes that have scratches or cracks? Can gluten stick in there?
Yeah, so I'm curious to see what you say about this, Selena, because sponges are used to clean things, and so I would generally say they're soap, they should be okay, but you do need to clean your sponges a lot. So I always like microwave my sponges when I'm switching gears in my kitchen. Different towels, I would say, yeah, you want to use a different towel because the flour kind of sticks on the towel. And then for things like cutting boards, it's really It's really up to you. Gluten can get stuck in the scratches, and that is considered high risk, when you're using a wooden cutting board. And I think, but if you're really, really good about cleaning, if it's a plastic cutting board, I think you might be okay. Wood, I would say you might want to use a different one. It kind of depends on the material.
Yeah, with a sponge and cloth, I think gluten particles, they can get stuck in those nooks and crannies. And so, it's easy enough. They're pretty cheap. I would just say have a designated sponge for washing if you're going to use that. If you use a cloth, I would just say, wipe it down. Ideally, they're actually supposed to be changed daily. I don't know if you guys knew that, but from a safety perspective, they're supposed to be washed daily. So that you should just throw them in the wash and they're good to go, right? For later use. And then for cutting boards, I would say, the best bet, because a lot of them are porous, like wood and that type of thing, is to have your own designated one.
Yeah, and we get questions about that a lot, and I think it's just easier sometimes to just have a separate one.
Totally. And that stress thing too, like sometimes people are so stressed about cross-contamination, just having that own area, having your own equipment, it kind of like reduces the overwhelm, the stress, the anxiety about thinking about it all the time.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ava. Lots of questions still. I'm just trying to pick ones that apply to the broadest range of folks. We've all heard about gluten-free Cheerios being not so. What about breakfast cereal that has no gluten ingredients but doesn't have a gluten-free label? Like there was the new Timbits cereal that was being discussed a lot because it looks gluten-free, but cereal is considered high risk. So is that something you recommend people consume?
I think it might be better if you take that because it's Canada specific. I mean, my opinion is that you should look for certified gluten-free cereal.
Yeah, I mean, from the CCA, cereals are made with grains which are considered high risk. So all cereals should have a gluten-free claim and/or certification logo on it in Canada to make sure that they're safe to consume.
What do you advise for celiacs who also have diabetes, whether it's type 1 or type 2? Like it can be hard to eat a balanced diet. Do you have any resources you'd recommend for that?
Well, fruits and vegetables are gluten-free and great for diabetics, and same with some of those proteins we were discussing. So I think a lot of those healthy principles we were speaking about before really apply even more with a person who has both diabetes and celiac disease. You might just have to watch your grain portions a little more, but if you're consuming a well-balanced, high fruit and vegetable diet that's high in fiber, that's going to be your best bet.
Mm-hmm.
Can you, in terms of baking, which gluten-free flours are more likely to be contaminated? Like we know not to get flours from bulk bins, that can be pretty high risk, but and flours vary in their nutritional value, of course. I know that buckwheat and sorghum are especially high risk. If someone wants to incorporate high nutrition flours in their diet, they're cooking or they're baking more with the pandemic, but don't want to get sick. Which flours would you recommend? Healthy and safe, essentially, is what we're looking for.
Well, for healthy and safe flours, flours are a little bit tricky to find right now. I don't know about you guys, but I've gone into the market and I can't even find like a one-to-one all-purpose flour blend. But if you do have those flour blends at home, an easy way to boost the nutrition is actually to sub out a quarter for the flour called for every 1 cup, sub out a quarter of it to be ground flax, which will help to improve the fiber content substantially in a one-to-one all-purpose flour blend. I really like buckwheat flour and then joining it with a potato starch. Buckwheat flour is actually one of the most nutritious flours to use. It is, of course, high risk, so you need to purchase it with a gluten-free claim and or a certification logo. I like Cuisine de Soleil. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's a gluten-free, safe brand. And it has about 9 grams of fiber per quarter of a cup. It's so nutritious. And then you can join that together with the starch to get a better texture in your final baked good.
This is a question that'll definitely apply to you, Megan. In terms of the gluten-free wheat starch that we see in products, I know I've eaten products in Europe from Dr. Schar that had wheat starch in them. I was fine. Is that considered in North America safe if you see wheat starch that's gluten-free on a label?
So certified gluten-free wheat starch, I can tell you a little bit about what exactly that is. So wheat has multiple components, and gluten is a protein. So basically, in the wheat kernel, all that they did was extract the starch portion. So the protein, which has the gluten, that's been totally removed. So in our case, we're a dedicated gluten-free company. We test that rigorously. That is certified gluten-free by the definition. It's not safe if you are allergic to wheat, however, because it is still a wheat-containing item. So gluten-free wheat starch has been in Europe they've been eating it for decades, and it seems to be safe for celiac. So I would say it's safe if it's on a certified gluten-free product, because that means it's been tested. But if sometimes I see wheat starch on a regular label that's not certified gluten-free, and that's not safe. So I know it's a confusing label. We make sure to clearly designate it, though. So I think if any company is using it, it'll be pretty clear on the label.
Yeah, I know in Canada we get questions about, well, it says gluten-free, but it also says may contain wheat, or wheat starches in the ingredients, but definitely the gluten-free claim, gluten-free certification trumps all these, and you can know it's gluten-free just by looking at that logo, which is really nice.
Yeah.
All right, I think we'll have to close it off there. Thanks so much to you both for sticking with us. Sorry for us running behind schedule, but it was a great presentation and a very engaged audience, lots of questions. So thanks for joining us today.
Great, well, thank you so much.
Before we move to our last speaker, we're actually going to have a brief presentation from our friends at Dr. Schar. Dr. Schar's mission is to improve the lives of people with special nutritional needs. Though their specialty is providing high-quality gluten-free foods for people with celiac disease and gluten sensitivity, they understand that irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS, affects many people in our gluten-free community. In fact, nearly a quarter of people with celiac disease experience overlapping IBS-related symptoms, despite strict adherence to the gluten-free diet. And the general population, IBS tends to affect around 10 to 15% of people. So it's a large segment of the population. This is why Dr. Schar has decided to partner with Monash University to certify some of their products as low FODMAP as well. The low FODMAP diet is the most evidence-based dietary treatment for IBS symptoms. FODMAPs are simple carbohydrates that draw water and gas into the digestive tract, and they trigger IBS symptoms in some individuals. Typical symptoms associated with IBS include gas, bloating, abdominal pain, and irregular bowel movements. And unfortunately, the low FODMAP diet can be very restrictive. I definitely consider it much more restrictive than the gluten-free diet. Dr. Schar's goal is to make the low FODMAP diet easier to follow by providing delicious food that won't trigger uncomfortable IBS symptoms. Schar is the first dedicated gluten-free company to partner with Monash University for low FODMAP certification. They chose to partner with Monash University because they're truly experts in this field, and they've contributed most of the research related to IBS and FODMAP diets. Dr. Schar is proud to announce that 5 of their products meet Monash's low FODMAP criteria. That is their ciabatta bread, multigrain ciabatta, crackers, rosemary crackers, and deli-style bread. And to finish, we're going to finish this segment, still have another presentation, but right now we're going to show a quick video from our friends at Dr. Schar.
Welcome to a Dr. Schar virtual tour. An insight into our heritage as pioneers of the gluten-free market and a peek into our state-of-the-art dedicated gluten-free bakery located in Swedesboro, New Jersey. It all started with Dr. Schar, a medical doctor practicing in Italy who developed a range of food products for children with gastrointestinal complaints. Our founder and president, Ulrich Lederner, took the helm and worked with doctors and celiac societies to develop a comprehensive gluten-free product line that was initially only available at pharmacies in Italy. The Dr. Schar R&D Center was established in Italy. The team is dedicated to the study of new and alternative ingredients and the development of new recipes to improve the nutritional and sensory profile of our products. With 35 years of experience, we are Europe's #1 in gluten-free. Dr. Schar expanded quickly. You can find our gluten-free products in over 80 countries around the world. We have 6 production sites internationally. Across the Atlantic, Dr. Schar USA was established. Today, we're the fastest growing gluten-free brand in the U.S. from our gluten-free bakery in Swedesboro, New Jersey. We work very closely with farmers growing gluten-free grains just for us. Ancient grains such as quinoa, buckwheat, millet, and amaranth make wholesome and tasty breads that are ready to be devoured straight out of the package. It's not just what goes into our breads, it's about what doesn't too. We choose not to add dairy, eggs, preservatives, and GMOs, and it goes without saying, no gluten. We test all raw materials, including packaging, for gluten before anything enters our facilities. Then all our products are tested throughout the entire production process to ensure there is no chance of cross-contamination. We use a special packaging process too. This, along with our unique recipe, is why our breads are soft and moist for 4 months when unopened without adding any preservatives. We do all these things to help our gluten-free consumers savor more of life's best things. Jam-speckled smiles over breakfast toast, crisp yet milk-drenched cookies, an unexpected text message from an old friend, and a bedtime story followed by some well-deserved me time, because it's the free things in life we consider to be the best. Dr. Schar's mission is to improve the lives of people with special nutritional needs.
What's been the hardest part of this disease for you? Has it gotten better or easier over time?
There's so many things that are going on in your body, mentally, physically, and you feel like you're all by yourself, like you're crazy. This isn't happening to anybody else. And then you hear other stories and you're like, oh my God, this happens to other people too.
It's nice when you know you're not the only one going through it.
Yeah, those things are very, very important to feel supported.
How's this affected your social life?
I was timid. It was almost a fear. I mean, like, I noticed I pulled back a lot, and that's not a fun place to be.
I definitely think it can be scary getting friends to understand that you're not trying to be picky. I just went to a party and I had a girlfriend go out of her way to get safe food options for me. And that's where the supportive friendship and supportive partner comes in.
Because of my disease, what are the biggest changes that you've had to make?
One simple dinner can take 5 to 6 hours, if not days.
Even though that it sounds like a lot of work, it's worth it because then you get to have something so delicious.
Schar is one of the first brands that we found after being diagnosed. They're delicious and it makes our lives easy.